In 1847, when the lands of the American West were still shrouded in mystery beneath the relentless sun, a man named Ezekiel Morrison established a ranch in a region few dared to enter. He lived completely alone for 7 years, sometimes going months without seeing another human. One stormy night, however, 7 figures appeared at his door, asking for shelter. They were armed Apaches, and Ezekiel had to decide whether opening his door would mean his salvation or his death. As Ezekiel Morrison fed the fire in his fireplace, the desert wind blew sand against the wooden windows of the small ranch. His weathered hands trembled slightly when he heard the hooves of several horses approaching in the darkness. In the wilds of New Mexico, nighttime visitors rarely brought good news. Ezekiel came to this desolate place in 1840, fleeing a life that no longer belonged to him after he lost his wife, Prudence, and his young son to yellow fever in San Antonio. Grief consumed him so completely that he decided to turn his back on civilization and search for a place where he could live without constant reminders of his loss. The ranch he built with his own hands stood alone in a valley surrounded by rocky mesas and giant cacti. He had a small herd of goats, a few chickens, and a well that provided fresh water year-round. This was enough for a man who no longer expected anything from life except the peace that came with isolation. The sounds of horses stopped near the front door. Ezekiel grabbed his Winchester rifle, checked that it was loaded, and cautiously approached the door. Through the slats of the wooden shutters, he could make out 7 figures on horseback in the dim moonlight. Their silhouettes stood out against the starry sky. From the way they sat in their saddles and carried their weapons, he knew immediately that they were Native Americans. A firm but not aggressive knock sounded on the wooden door. Ezekiel kept his rifle ready as he approached the door. "Who goes there?" he shouted in English, his voice hoarse from disuse. "We are weary travelers," replied a deep voice in English with a thick accent. "We seek shelter from the approaching storm." Ezekiel looked up at the sky through the window. Black clouds were gathering rapidly, and he could already smell the rain in the air. A desert storm could be deadly for those caught out in the open. "How many are there?" he asked. "7. We are Apaches, but we come in peace. We don't want trouble. We just need a place to shelter until the storm passes." Ezekiel felt his heart race. The Apaches had a fearsome reputation in these lands. They were fierce warriors who had first fought the Mexicans, and now they were fighting the Americans, who were arriving in increasing numbers to their ancestral territories. However, he had also heard stories about their code of honor and how they respected those who treated them fairly. "How do I know I can trust you?" Ezekiel asked. "Because if we wanted to hurt you, we would have done so already," replied the voice. "We've been watching your ranch from the hill for hours. We know you're alone." The first raindrops hit the corrugated metal roof. Ezekiel knew that a storm could break out at any moment and last for hours. He also knew that if these men had wanted to attack him, they would have done so by now.
He made a decision that would change his life forever. "You can come in," he said, removing the wooden bar that secured the door. "But keep your guns holstered." The door opened slowly, and the first Apache entered. He was a tall, thin man in his 40s, with black hair tied back in a long braid. His dark eyes quickly scanned the interior of the ranch before signaling to his companions. "My name is loneliest," he said in English. "These are my brothers and my son." The other 6 Apaches entered one by one. Ezekiel noticed that one of them was just a boy, probably loneliest's son. The others were mature men, all with the strong builds and silent movements characteristic of Apache warriors. "I'm Ezekiel Morrison," said the rancher, lowering his rifle, but keeping it close. "You can sit by the fire. I have some coffee if you want some." The Apaches sat on the floor near the fireplace. Ezekiel noticed that although they had accepted his hospitality, they remained alert and ready to act if necessary. It was clear that they did not completely trust him either. Nyalnis looked around the ranch. It was a simple yet sturdy structure, with handmade furniture and neatly organized tools. Animal skins decorated the walls, and a few books occupied a small shelf near the table. "You've lived here a long time," Nyalnis observed. It wasn't a question. "7 years," Ezekiel replied, as he prepared coffee in a metal pot. "Why did you choose to live so far from your people?" Ezekiel was silent for a moment. He hadn't talked about his past with anyone in years, but Nyalnis's direct yet respectful way of asking the question moved him to respond. "I lost my family to illness. I no longer found any reason to be around others." Nyalnis nodded understandingly. Pain can be a heavy companion. Outside, the storm raged with all its fury. Lightning lit up the sky, and the wind rattled the windows. Ezekiel poured coffee into metal cups and handed them out to his unexpected guests. "Where are you traveling to?" Ezekiel asked. "North," Nyalnis replied. "Our people are being pressured by American soldiers. We're looking for a place where we can live in peace." "Have you had problems with the army?" "Many problems. They accuse us of thefts we did not commit. They claim that our lands now belong to the United States, and that we must go to the reservations." Nyalnis took a sip of coffee. "But these lands have been ours for generations. Our ancestors are buried here." Ezekiel understood that feeling. Although he had chosen to distance himself from civilization, he knew what it meant to lose one's place. "And your son?" he asked, looking at the boy who appeared to be about 16 years old. "Yato," said Nyalnis. "He is learning the ways of our people. This is his first long journey." The young Apache looked up and smiled shyly at Ezekiel. Despite his youth, he had the same calm, alert presence as the others. The storm continued for several hours. The men talked little, but the initial tension had eased. Ezekiel realized that he had gone longer than he had thought without talking to other people. Despite the strange circumstances, he found some comfort in their company. When the rain finally stopped near dawn, the Apaches prepared to leave. Nyalnis approached Ezekiel. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said. "We will not forget it." "It was the right thing to do. I hope you find what you're looking for." Nyalnis hesitated for a moment. "Do you know anything about the soldiers who patrol this area?" "A patrol comes every 2 or 3 months. The last one was 6 weeks ago. They'll probably be back soon." "What will you tell them when they come?" "That I haven't seen anything unusual."
They don't usually stay long. There's nothing here that interests them. Nyalnis nodded. "You're a good man, Ezekiel Morrison. If you ever need help, leave a mark on that big rock by the well. 2 crossed lines. Someone from my village will come." The Apaches mounted their horses and rode away to the north, disappearing among the rock formations as quietly as they had arrived. Ezekiel watched them until they were out of sight. Then he returned to his ranch and his solitary routine. However, something had changed. Over the next few days, he found himself remembering his conversation with Nyalnis and feeling a strange nostalgia for human companionship, which he had avoided for so long. 2 weeks later, while checking on his goats near the creek, Ezekiel noticed smoke signals in the distance. 3 thin columns rose from different points in the northern hills. He recognized them as some kind of communication system, though he did not understand their meaning. That night, while eating his usual dinner of beans and cornbread, he heard a sound he hadn't heard in years, the cry of a child. He went to the window and saw a small figure approaching the ranch. It was an Indian girl no older than 8, and she appeared to be alone. Ezekiel left his house and carefully approached the girl. She was dirty and clearly hungry, with tears marking furrows in her dust-covered cheeks. "Where is your family?" he asked in English. The girl looked at him with big, frightened eyes, but did not answer. Ezekiel realized that she probably didn't speak English. "Food," he said slowly, gesturing toward his mouth.
"Are you hungry?" The girl nodded vigorously. He took her inside and prepared a plate of food for her. As she ate voraciously, he wondered what had happened to her family and how she had ended up alone in the desert. The next morning, Ezekiel decided to do something he hadn't done in years: leave his ranch to seek help. He remembered Nalnis's words about leaving a mark on the rock by the well. He took a knife and carved 2 crossed lines into the stone. Then he waited. He didn't have to wait long. At noon, a mounted Apache appeared on the horizon. Ezekiel recognized one of the men who had been at his ranch that stormy night. "I am Ezekiel," the Apache said as he approached. "Nalnis sent me when she saw your signal." "I found a girl," Ezekiel explained. "She seems to be lost."
When Ezekiel saw the girl, his expression softened. He spoke to her in Apache, and she responded quickly, obviously relieved to be able to communicate in her own language. "Her family was attacked by soldiers 3 days ago," Ezekiel translated. "She hid, and then she walked for days looking for help. Her name is Adriana." "What happened to her family?" "Dead, all of them." Ezekiel looked down at the ground. "The soldiers said that they had stolen cattle, but Adriana's family never stole anything. They were peaceful people." Ezekiel felt a familiar pang of pain. He remembered the devastation of losing his own family, but the circumstances were different. "What will happen to her?" "Nalnis says she can come with us. We have other families who can take care of her." Ezekiel nodded, but when he looked at Adriana, he saw in her eyes the same empty gaze he had after losing his family. "Can I talk to Nalnis?" "He's a day's journey north. Can you come with us?" Ezekiel hadn't left his ranch for more than a few hours in years, but something compelled him to make this journey. He packed supplies and left extra food and water for his animals. Then he followed Ezekiel to the Apache camp. The camp was temporary and set up in a canyon sheltered by red rocks. There were about 15 families with teepees made of skins and blankets. Children played near a small stream, while women prepared food and men tended to the horses. Nalnis greeted him warmly and with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon, Ezekiel Morrison," she said. The girl said directly, "What will happen to Adriana?" "She will be adopted by one of our families. It is our custom to care for orphans." "What if I want to take care of her?" Nalnis studied him carefully. "You are a white man. She is Apache. It would be difficult for both of you." "I lost my own daughter," Ezekiel said, his words coming out with difficulty. "She was the same age as Adriana. I know what it's like to be alone in the world." "Are you serious?" "Yes, if she wants to, of course, and if you allow it." Nalnis called Eliana and spoke to her in Apache. The girl looked at Ezekiel seriously. Then she answered Nalnis. She said that he reminds her of her grandfather, who was also a kind man. "She says she feels safe with you. That means we can try, but there are conditions."
"First, she must learn the ways of both your people and hers. She must know where she comes from. We will also visit her regularly." Ezekiel nodded. "I understand." And so, Ezekiel Morrison, the lonely rancher, became Adriana's adoptive father. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but not uncomfortable. The girl rode behind him on his horse, and he could feel her gradually relaxing. The first few days were difficult. Adriana spoke very little English, and Ezekiel knew no Apache. But little by little, using gestures and simple words, they began to communicate. Ezekiel taught her how to care for the goats and chickens, and she showed him how to start a fire without matches and identify edible desert plants. Sil came to visit them once a week, bringing news from the village and helping with translation when necessary. Through Sil, Ezekiel learned more about Apache culture, and Adriana practiced her English. "Why did you decide to keep the girl?" Sil asked him one afternoon. "I think we need each other," Ezekiel replied. "She lost her family, and I lost mine. Maybe together we can find a new one." The months passed. Hatiana flourished under Ezekiel's care. She quickly learned English and taught him words in Apache. Together, they established a routine. They worked on the ranch during the day, and at night, Ezekiel read to Hatiana from his books while she told him stories about her people. But the peace could not last forever. One day in early fall, a U.S. Army patrol arrived at the ranch. There were 5 soldiers led by a sergeant named Mackenzie, a tough man with cold eyes and a hostile attitude toward Native Americans. "Morrison," he said without dismounting, "we've been tracking a group of Apaches who stole cattle near Santa Fe. Have you seen any Indians around here?" Ezekiel, who had been repairing a fence, slowly stood up. Hatiana was inside the house, and he hoped she would stay there. "I haven't seen anything unusual," Ezekiel replied. "Are you sure? Because we have reports that they were heading toward this area." "Like I said, I haven't seen anything." Mackenzie finally dismounted and approached Ezekiel. "Morrison, we need to search your property. It's for safety reasons." "Do you have a warrant? Don't we need one on border territory? We're looking for dangerous savages." Ezekiel knew he couldn't stop the search. "Go ahead, but you won't find anything." The soldiers began searching the ranch. Ezekiel prayed silently that Hatiana would remain hidden, but his prayers went unanswered. One of the soldiers opened the house's door and shouted, "Sergeant, there's an Indian here." Mackenzie ran toward the house, followed by Ezekiel. Hatiana stood in the center of the room, chin raised defiantly, but eyes filled with obvious fear. "What is this, Morrison?" demanded Mackenzie. "She is my adopted daughter," said Ezekiel. "Your adopted daughter? An Apache?" "Yes, I found her lost and adopted her." Mackenzie laughed cruelly. "Don't tell me a white man adopted a savage Apache. Where are the adoption papers?" "There are no papers. It was an agreement with her tribe." "An agreement with the Apaches?" Mackenzie approached Hatiana. "Do you speak English, girl?" "Yes," Hatiana replied in a firm voice. "Where is your tribe?" "I don't know," Hatiana lied. Mackenzie turned to Ezekiel. "Morrison, this girl is coming with us. She's going to a school for Native Americans where she can be properly civilized." "No," Ezekiel shouted. "She's staying with me. She hasn't done anything wrong." "Apache, that's enough!" Mackenzie signaled to his soldiers, "Take her." But before they could move, they heard the rapid approach of horses. Through the window, Ezekiel saw loneliest and 20 Apache warriors surrounding the ranch. "Looks like you have visitors, Morrison," Mackenzie said. His voice had lost some of its confidence, though. Loneliest dismounted and approached the door. "Sergeant Mackenzie," he said in clear English.
"We have come for the girl." "This is a military operation," Mackenzie replied. "Withdraw immediately. The girl is under the protection of our people and Mr. Morrison. We will not allow you to take her." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ezekiel stepped between the soldiers, knowing that one wrong word could spark a battle. "Sergeant," Ezekiel said calmly, "I think we should talk outside." McKenney glared at him but nodded. They left the house, leaving Tiana with 2 guards. "Mackenzie," Nolna said once they were outside, "do you know the law? Mr. Morrison has the right to adopt the girl if he wants to, and if we allow it." "I don't recognize any rights involving savages," Mackenzie replied. "Then maybe you'll recognize this," Nolna said, pulling a piece of paper from his shirt. "It's a treaty signed by the U.S. government recognizing the rights of our people." McKenna took the paper and read it quickly. His expression hardened. "This changes nothing. The girl could be a security threat." "An 8-year-old girl?" Ezekiel asked. "Seriously, Morrison, I suggest you get out of this. You're already in enough trouble for harboring an Apache." Nulness stepped forward. "Sergeant, I'll make you a deal. We'll let the girl stay with Mr. Morrison, and we'll move further north, away from the trade routes. There won't be any more trouble. And if I refuse? Nalnis looked at the surrounding warriors. Then I think you'll have to explain to your superiors why 5 soldiers didn't return from a routine patrol. McKenzie realized he was outnumbered and surrounded. After a long moment, he signaled to his soldiers. "This isn't over, Morrison. We'll be watching." The soldiers mounted their horses and rode away. However, Ezekiel knew that McKenzie meant what he said. They would return, and next time they might bring more men. "Thank you," Ezekiel said to Nalnis. "Don't thank us yet. This has only just begun." Nalnis looked toward where the soldiers had disappeared. "They're going to bring more men. Maybe you should consider moving." "Where?" "North, with us. You could live near our village. Haitiana could grow up knowing both cultures." Ezekiel considered the proposal. He had built this ranch with his own hands, and it was the only thing he had left from his previous life. But looking at her standing next to him after she had left the house, he knew it was no longer just about him. "I need time to think about it," he said. "You don't have much time. McKenzie will be back soon." That night, after the Apaches left, Ezekiel and Haitiana sat by the fire. The girl had been unusually quiet since the encounter with the soldiers. "Are you scared?" Ezekiel asked her. "A little." "Are they going to take me away?" "No, if I can help it. But what if they bring more soldiers?" Ezekiel didn't have an easy answer. "Haitiana, what do you want to do? If you want to go with your people, I'll understand." The girl looked at him seriously. "I want to stay with you, but I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." "You're not a burden," Ezekiel told her. "You're my daughter now. Families protect each other." 2 days later, Ezekiel made his decision. He began packing his most important belongings and preparing the ranch for abandonment. He couldn't take everything, only the essentials. "Are we going to live with the people of Nalnis?" Haitiana asked. "For a while, until things calm down. Then we'll see. Maybe we can find a place where we can live in peace." Basil arrived that afternoon to help with the move. He brought 3 additional horses and some provisions. "Nalnis says we must leave tonight. Our scouts have seen soldiers moving south. They could be here tomorrow." Ezekiel took one last look at his ranch. It had been his refuge for 7 years, the place where he had learned to live with his pain. But now it had become something more, the place where he had found a new family. "Are you ready?" Basil asked. "Yes," Ezekiel replied. "I'm ready." They mounted their horses and headed north under the starlight. Haitiana rode alongside Ezekiel. For the first time in years, he felt as if he were going home instead of away from it. The journey to the Apache camp took 2 days. They traveled along hidden trails among the rocks, avoiding the main routes where they might encounter army patrols. Basil knew the terrain perfectly, guiding them through narrow canyons and over rocky ridges. During the journey, Ezekiel reflected on how his life had changed. Less than a year ago, he had been a bitter recluse, avoiding all human contact. Now, he was leaving everything behind to protect an Apache girl who had become his daughter. "Do you regret it?" Basil asked him during a rest stop. "What?" "Adopting Haitiana? Your life was simpler before." Ezekiel looked at the girl playing with wildflowers near the stream. He didn't say anything. "I don't regret it. She gave me my life back." When they arrived at the Apache camp, they were greeted with curiosity and warmth. Nalnis had prepared a teepee for them near his own, and the women of the village brought food and blankets. "Welcome," said Nalnis. "You are now part of our people." "What exactly does that mean?" asked Ezekiel. "It means you have our rights and responsibilities. You will contribute to the well-being of the village, and the village will protect you." Ezekiel was overwhelmed by this generosity. "What can I do to help?" "You have skills we can use. You know about livestock and construction, among other things. Aitiana can also help our children learn English." The following days were a time of adjustment. Ezekiel learned the routines of the Apache village, participated in daily tasks, and gradually began to feel like part of the community. Aitiana flourished, playing with other children and reconnecting with her cultural heritage. However, the peace could not last. One morning, the scouts returned with troubling news. "Soldiers," one of them reported. "Many are coming north." Nalni gathered the village leaders. "How many?" he asked. "At least 50, maybe more. They are well armed and have cannons." "Do they know where we are?" "I don't think so, but they're searching every canyon and camp. Eventually, they will find us." Nalni turned to Ezekiel. "I think they're coming for you and Idiana." "For us?" "McKinney won't give up easily. He's probably convinced his superiors that you're an Apache sympathizer and a security threat." Ezekiel felt a mixture of guilt and determination. "I can't let the whole village suffer because of me." "You're not going anywhere," Nalmi said firmly. "You're one of us now." But Ezekiel had already made up his mind. That night, while the village slept, he quietly woke Idiana. "What's wrong?" the girl asked. "We have to leave," Ezekiel said. "The soldiers are coming for us, and I can't let them hurt your people." "Where are we going?" "West, to California. We can start over there." Idiana looked at him with sad but understanding eyes. "We have to leave Nalnis and the others behind. It's the only way to keep them safe." They quietly packed their few belongings. Ezekiel left a note for Nalnismus, explaining his decision and thanking him for everything. Then, under the moonlight, they left the Apache camp. They traveled for days, avoiding the main roads and sticking to rough terrain that would make it difficult for the soldiers' horses to follow them. Idiana proved to be a resilient traveling companion, never complaining about the long hours on horseback or the cold nights sleeping under the stars. A week after leaving the camp, they arrived in a small town called Esperanza, located on the border between New Mexico and Arizona. It was a dusty place with about 20 houses, a cantina, and a general store. "We can stay here for a while," Hatiana suggested. "Until we know if the soldiers are following us," Ezekiel replied. They checked into the small inn in town. The owner, Diego Herrera, who was Mexican, looked at them curiously but asked no questions. On the border, people had learned not to ask too many questions about each other's pasts. "Are you looking for work?" Diego asked. "The Mendoza Ranch needs help. They're losing cattle to rustlers." "What kind of help?" "Someone who knows about cattle and can handle a rifle?" Ezekiel considered the offer. They needed money, and staying in one place might help them determine if it was safe. "Where is the ranch?" 5 miles west of town. It belongs to the Mendoza family. They're good people." The next day, Ezekiel and Atiana rode to the Mendoza ranch. It was a sizable operation with several hundred head of cattle and a well-built ranch house. They were greeted by Don Ricardo Mendoza, a middle-aged man with gray hair and kind eyes. "Mr. Morrison?" Don Ricardo asked in English with a Spanish accent. "Yes, sir. Diego Herrera told me you needed help." "Indeed, we have lost nearly 50 head of cattle in the last 2 weeks. The rustlers are becoming bolder." "Have you seen the thieves?" "Yes. They are American, not Mexican or Indian. They have a camp in the mountains to the north somewhere. Ezekiel looked toward the mountains. The terrain was difficult, perfect for hiding, but also dangerous. What do you suggest? I need someone who can track down these thieves and recover my cattle. I'll pay you well. And my daughter. Don Ricardo looked kindly at Atiana. You can stay here with my wife and daughters. You'll be safe. Ezekiel accepted the job. Over the next few days, he studied the theft patterns and tracked the thieves' footprints. Clearly, they knew the terrain well and had information about the cattle's movements. Someone is giving them information, he told Don Ricardo one night. What do you mean? They know exactly when and where to strike. That requires inside knowledge. Don Ricardo frowned. All my cowboys have been with me for years. I can't believe one of them would betray me. Maybe it's not one of your cowboys. Who else would know about your operations? Well, there are merchants who come to buy cattle, and the sheriff knows our movements. The sheriff? Yes, a man named Garrett came to town a few months ago. Ezekiel felt a chill of suspicion. What does he look like? Tall and thin, with scars on his face? He says he's from Texas. He helped chase thieves away, but he always says he's too busy with other matters. That night, Ezekiel rode back to town. He wanted to know more about Sheriff Garrett. The saloon was full of cowboys and traders, and it didn't take him long to find someone willing to talk. Get it, said a trader named Tom. Yes, I know him. He showed up here 3 months ago, claiming that the territorial government had sent him to maintain order. Do you have papers to confirm that? Garrett says he does, but no one has seen them. He wears a badge, though, so people believe him. What do you think of him? Tom looked around cautiously. To be honest, I think he's an imposter. He asks too many questions about who has what, yet he never seems to do anything to stop the thefts. Ezekiel had enough information. He returned to the Mendoza ranch and shared his suspicions with Don Ricardo. Do you think Garrett is working with the thieves? It's possible. I think we should test him. How? Tell him you're moving your cattle to a new pasture tomorrow, but give him the wrong location. Then we'll see if the thieves show up there. Don Ricardo agreed with the plan.
The next day, he went to town and told Garrett that he was moving 100 head of cattle to a valley east of the ranch. In reality, the cattle would remain in the western pastures. Ezekiel hid on a hill overlooking the eastern valley. He didn't have to wait long. Before noon, 6 men appeared in the valley, expecting to find cattle. One of them was Garrett. Ezekiel returned to the ranch and told Don Ricardo what he had seen. What do we do now? Don Ricardo asked. We need evidence that can be used against him, and we need to find his camp. How? I'll follow him. Over the next few days, Ezekiel discreetly followed Garrett. The fake sheriff had a routine. He made his rounds in town during the day, but at night he headed for the mountains. On the 4th day, Ezekiel followed Garrett to a hidden canyon where there was a camp with 8 men and a corral full of stolen cattle. Perfect, Ezekiel murmured. Now he had to decide what to do with this information. He returned to the Mendoza ranch and gathered Don Ricardo and his trusted cowboys. I found them, he announced. But there are 8 of them and they're well armed. What do you propose? Asked Don Ricardo. We could go for help from the army, but that would take days. By then, they could have moved the cattle. Or we could handle this ourselves. Don Ricardo considered the options. How? Garrett is coming to town tonight, as usual. If we can capture him, we can use him to negotiate with the others. It's risky. Yes, but it's our best chance. That night, Ezekiel and 2 cowboys waited in the cantina for Garrett. When the fake sheriff walked in, they acted quickly. Ezekiel approached from behind while the cowboys blocked the exit. Sergeant Garrett, Ezekiel said calmly, I think we need to talk. Garrett turned, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun, but he stopped when he saw that he was surrounded.
What are you talking about? Cattle stolen from a camp in the mountains. How a sheriff who should be protecting people is actually robbing them. Garrett tried to maintain his facade. I don't know what you're talking about. Then you won't mind coming with us to clear things up. Without giving him a choice, they escorted him out of the saloon. Once outside, Garrett tried to escape, but Ezekiel was prepared. He quickly knocked Garrett down and tied him up. What are you going to do with me? Garrett asked. That's up to you, Ezekiel replied. You can cooperate and maybe get out of this alive, or you can be stubborn and end up badly. They took Garrett to the Mendoza ranch, where Don Ricardo and more cowboys were waiting for him. Where's my cattle? Don Ricardo asked. I don't know what you're talking about, Garrett insisted. Ezekiel approached him. Look, we know everything. We saw you at the camp. We know you're giving them information about the cattle's movements. The only question is whether you're going to cooperate or if we are going to have to resolve this the hard way. Garrett surrendered. Okay, but I'm not the leader. I'm just a minor partner. Who's the leader? A man named Black Pit Morrison has a camp in Devil's Canyon. Ezekiel felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Yes, he knows Morrison. What does he look like? Tall with black hair and a scar on his left cheek. He says he's from Texas. Ezekiel recognized the description. It was his younger brother, Peter, whom he hadn't seen in 15 years. Peter had always gotten into trouble, but Ezekiel never thought he would become a thief. Mr. Morrison? Don Ricardo asked, noticing Ezekiel's pallor. Are you all right? Yes, Ezekiel lied. It's just a coincidence, the last name. But it wasn't a coincidence. Ezekiel knew that he now had to face not only the thieves, but also his own past. How many men does Morrison have? Ezekiel asked. 7, including me, Garrett replied. They're willing to fight. It depends. If they think they can win, then yes.
But if they see that they're outnumbered, they might surrender. Ezekiel turned to Don Ricardo. We need more men. How many? At least 15, maybe 20. I can get 10 reliable cowboys. We can find more in town. That's possible, but we need men who know how to use a rifle. They spent the night planning the attack. Ezekiel drew a map of the camp based on his observations, and they discussed different strategies. What do we do with the cattle? One of the cowboys asked. First, we take care of the thieves, replied Ezekiel. Then we will recover the cattle. At dawn, the group was ready. They had 18 men, including Ezekiel and Don Ricardo. Garrett had agreed to guide them to the camp in exchange for a more lenient sentence. The trip to Devil's Canyon took 3 hours. When they reached the entrance, Ezekiel divided the men into 3 groups. One group would attack from the front, one from the left, and one from the right. Remember, said Ezekiel, we want to capture them alive if possible, but if they start shooting, do whatever you have to protect yourselves. The men positioned themselves silently. Ezekiel led the group that would attack from the front, hoping to have a chance to talk to his brother before the fighting began. At his signal, the 3 groups moved toward the camp. The bandits were caught off guard. Some were still sleeping, and others were just eating breakfast. You're surrounded, Ezekiel shouted. Drop your weapons. The bandits were surprised, but reacted quickly. Some ran to their horses, and others to their rifles. One of them, a tall man with black hair, shouted orders to the others. It was Peter Morrison, Ezekiel's brother. Pit, Ezekiel shouted. It's me, Ezekiel. Peter stopped and looked toward the voice. When he saw his brother, his expression changed from surprise to something more complex. I know, he said incredulously. What the hell are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. What are you doing stealing cattle? Surviving, Peter replied, just like you. This isn't surviving. This is stealing. So what? Now you're a saint? The conversation was interrupted by gunfire. One of the thieves had decided to fight, and soon the entire camp was caught up in the battle.
Ezekiel took cover behind a rock and tried to reason with his brother again. "Pitt, we can still work this out. Surrender and no one else has to die." "It's too late for that," Peter shouted as he fired at the cowboys. "You chose your side." The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, 3 robbers were dead, including Peter Morrison. 2 others were wounded, and the remaining 2 surrendered. Ezekiel approached his brother's body. Despite everything he had done, Peter was still his younger brother, the boy who had played with him on the family farm so many years ago. Don Ricardo approached Ezekiel. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison. I know he was your brother." "How did you know?" "The last name and the way he looked at you." Ezekiel nodded. "I hadn't seen him in a long time. I had hoped he had taken a different path. Sometimes people make bad decisions, but you made the right ones." They recovered all the stolen cattle and returned to the ranch. Ezekiel felt empty and exhausted, not only from the battle, but from the weight of having lost his brother. That night, while dining with Don Ricardo and his family, Haitiana approached him. "Are you sad?" "A little," Ezekiel admitted. "Why?" "Because sometimes the people we love make decisions that hurt us." Haitiana hugged him. "I will never do that," she said. Ezekiel hugged her back. "I know, my daughter. I know." The next day, Don Ricardo offered Ezekiel a permanent job as ranch foreman. "What do you say?" "What do you say?" Don Ricardo asked.
Would you like to stay with us? Ezekiel looked at Adiana, who was playing with Don Ricardo's daughters. For the first time in a long time, she looked truly happy. "Yes," said Ezekiel. "I think we'd like to stay." And so Ezekiel Morrison, a man who had lived alone for years until 7 Apaches sought refuge on his ranch, finally found a home, not only for himself, but also for the family he had found along the way. The following months were peaceful. Ezekiel worked as a foreman on the Mendoza ranch, and Adiana attended the small village school. At night, they continued to tell each other stories in their respective languages, keeping both cultures alive. Loneliest visited them once, bearing news that his people had found a new home farther north, far from the soldiers. He was glad to see that Ezekiel and Adiana had found peace. "Are you happy?" Loneliest asked Ezekiel. "Yes," Ezekiel replied, looking at Adiana playing with the other children. "I'm finally happy." "And you don't miss your solitary life?" Ezekiel smiled. "I thought I would miss it, but it turns out that what I really needed wasn't solitude, but the right kind of company." The sun was setting over the mountains to the west, painting the sky red and gold. Ezekiel Morrison, once a bitter hermit, was now a man with a family and a purpose. Life had taken an unexpected turn, but it was a journey worth taking. In the distance, the coyotes began their nightly song, and Ezekiel felt that he had finally found his place in the world. Now that you've seen the whole story, we would greatly appreciate it if you would rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us improve and ensure that we offer the kind of narrative you enjoy.